The mountain had a way of keeping secrets, and on that cold morning it felt as if it was finally ready to give one up. The wind rolled down the slopes like a warning, rattling the pine needles and pressing against the lonely cabin as if trying to wake the man inside. When he stepped out onto the creaking porch, expecting nothing more than another empty day, he sensed it instantly, a heavy presence in the air, the kind that makes the heart slow and the past stir without permission. Something was wrong, and before his eyes could even understand it, his soul already did. Before the story pulls you deeper into the mountains and into this man's life, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of compassion that can change a life when all seems lost. He had come to the mountain to disappear, not because he hated the world, but because the world had quietly stopped making room for him. Years earlier, he had been a man of routines and responsibilities, with a small-town job, a modest home, and a family name that once meant something. But loss has a way of erasing those things, stripping life down to its barest bones. When his wife passed after a long illness and his only son drifted away into a life he could no longer reach, the silence became unbearable. The mountain offered a different kind of silence, one that felt honest. Up there, the quiet did not pretend to care, and somehow that felt easier to live with. His days followed the same pattern, shaped by survival rather than hope. He chopped wood, checked traps, repaired old tools, and watched the seasons change like a slow-moving painting. He spoke to no one, and in time, even his own voice felt unfamiliar. The cabin, built decades earlier by a man who also wanted to be forgotten, became both shelter and prison. Yet on that morning, when the wind carried a strange scent that did not belong to pine or snow, the mountain seemed to lean closer, as if urging him to look. Near the edge of the clearing, something pale stood out against the dark wood of the cabin's structure. At first, his tired eyes refused to make sense of it. Then his heart began to pound as recognition slowly took shape. A woman, unconscious but breathing, was tangled near the roofline where a broken ladder had collapsed. Her blonde hair caught the weak sunlight, bright and startling against the weathered logs. She looked like she did not belong there, like a fragment of another world dropped into his forgotten one. Fear and instinct collided as he moved, his body remembering how to act before his mind could catch up. He lowered her carefully, his hands shaking not from cold but from the sudden responsibility he had avoided for years. She was alive, barely, her skin chilled, her clothes torn by branches and ice. As he carried her inside, the cabin felt smaller, crowded with a presence that forced him to acknowledge how long it had been since he had cared for another human being. While he worked to warm her and tend to her injuries, he noticed something else, something that made his breath catch. Carved into one of the old roof beams outside, darkened by time and weather, were words he had never seen before. They were crude and uneven, as if burned in a moment of pain or rage, and yet they were unmistakable. The message spoke of betrayal, of love twisted into something bitter, and of a past that refused to stay buried. It was not addressed to him, but somehow it felt like it was. As the hours passed, memories he had buried under years of isolation began to surface. Long before the cabin was his refuge, it had been known in the region for a scandal that no one talked about openly anymore. A man had once lived there with a woman who vanished, without explanation, leaving behind rumors and a silence thick enough to choke curiosity. The mountain remembered, even if the people chose to forget. And now, with this woman lying on his bed, her shallow breaths filling the room, it felt as if history was looping back on itself. Caring for her changed something in him that he had assumed was gone forever. Each small action, each careful movement, reminded him that he was still capable of gentleness. He watched her chest rise and fall through the night, the fire crackling low, and realized how deeply he had missed the simple act of worrying about someone else. The loneliness that had once felt like armor now felt like a weight he had been carrying for far too long. When she finally stirred, her presence brought more questions than answers. Her eyes opened slowly, filled with confusion and fear that mirrored his own inner state. She seemed to recognize the cabin, or at least the feeling of it, as if it existed somewhere deep in her memory. Though she was weak and unable to explain how she had come to the mountain, her reactions told a story of someone running from something rather than toward it. Days passed, and with each one, the mountain man found himself changing. He spoke more, even if only to explain what he was doing or to reassure her that she was safe. The cabin, once a place of self-imposed exile, became a space of quiet healing. He learned that she carried her own grief, shaped by family secrets and unanswered questions that had followed her since childhood. The burned message on the beam, it seemed, was connected to her past, a warning left by someone who had loved and lost in a way that left scars on generations. As they recovered together, something unexpected happened. The mountain, once a symbol of escape, began to feel like a place of reckoning. He confronted the truth of why he had isolated himself, understanding that his withdrawal had not protected him from pain, but had only delayed it. She, in turn, faced the reality that running had not freed her from the past she was trying to outrun. The mountain did not offer easy answers, but it demanded honesty. The real challenge came when the weather turned and the path down the mountain became treacherous. Help was days away, and the responsibility of keeping her safe rested entirely on him. Old fears surfaced, the fear of failing someone again, of being the reason another person suffered. Yet each time doubt crept in, he remembered that morning on the porch, the moment he had chosen to act instead of turning away. That choice, small as it seemed then, had already changed everything. Slowly, strength returned to her body, and clarity returned to his heart. Together, they pieced together fragments of the past, realizing that the dark message burned into the cabin was not a curse, but a reminder. It was proof that love, even when broken, leaves marks that shape the future. The pain that once haunted the cabin no longer felt threatening, it felt acknowledged, finally allowed to rest. As the days grew brighter and the snow began to melt, the mountain man understood something profound. Loneliness had convinced him that he was done with life, that his story had already reached its quiet ending. But standing there, watching someone rediscover her will to live under his roof, he saw that endings were rarely as final as they felt. Sometimes they were simply pauses, waiting for courage to resume. Just before the story reaches its final moments, leave a comment sharing what this journey means to you. Whether it reminded you of someone you've lost, someone you've found, or a second chance you didn't expect. When the path finally cleared and help arrived, the cabin no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a beginning. The woman would eventually leave the mountain, carrying with her answers she had searched for her entire life. He would remain, but not in the same way as before. The silence would still be there, but it would no longer be empty. It would be filled with the knowledge that he mattered, that his choices could still shape the world in small, meaningful ways. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the quiet battles people fight or the unexpected ways lives can intersect, please like, share, and engage with this video. Your support helps stories like this reach others who might need them most. As the sun dipped behind the peaks, casting long shadows across the clearing, the mountain man stood on his porch once more. The wind moved through the trees, no longer whispering warnings, but carrying something softer, something like peace. The mountain had given up its secret, and in doing so, it had given him back a piece of himself.